Hello and welcome to this week's edition of The Road Less Traveled. Gary L. and G.D.'s boo is en route. She went to her uncle's graduation type function at a gunsmith school that he's finishing up. And it's a little bit of a road trip, and she's on the way back. We'll see if she makes it in time to jump on. She should. The timing should be about right. Anyway, hope you're all well. I got a little bit of a head cold, which you can probably hear. I've been trying to work on that. The little granny's rheumatism medicine. No, not really. But anyway, we're doing well here otherwise, and hope you are doing the same. We'll say hello to everybody over on reallibertymedia.com. This is the home of the Road Less Traveled, plus a whole plethora. That's one of them fancy words, plethora. One of the plethora of other great shows that come on. Just go to the webpage and pull down the show schedule. You'll see all kinds of neat stuff, and most of it is archived. Yay! So you don't really have to be here live. But if you miss it live, you don't get to come into the chat room. It's an IRC chat that's dedicated only to Real Liberty Media viewers and listeners. You can find that on the Real Liberty Media homepage on the front page. Slide down just a little bit and you'll see the chat applet right there for you to put your name in. Put your name in there and come on in, join the chatters. I see Grammy's here now just for notification purposes. Grammy is in a blizzard in Kansas. Yeah, extreme weather. Yeah, Grammy's there. She doesn't have commercial power, but she's checked in with battery. And she says that they probably won't get electricity until sometime tomorrow. So you see how beneficial the RLM chat is. Here she is out there stuck in Kansas with no power. And she can check into the chat room and keep everyone advised of what's going on. Yeah, nothing like a blizzard in Kansas. At least that keeps Dorothy in the house. And Toto, too. Anyway, we'll say hello out there to Beth C., Kate, Moose Girl, Asmo, Chalcedony, Chloe, Dakota, Ibidon C., Java Doctor, JJ's here, Paul Bunyan, Rob Works, Trust No One, Vinny, Woodman, Auntie. Auntie's here. Don't see Auntie too often. Hello, Auntie. Got behind the woodshed, Bitcoin Bob, Colfax, Dima, I get it. Free Slave, Grammy Fire, as I just mentioned, Jehovah, Wanatako, Kozu, Lowercase Man, Mbut, North Forest Pawn Sauce, Rain, Stats Bob, Tips Bob. I actually had to pull the slider. We've got so many people in here. Vil and Phantom. And Vinny says, never underestimate an idiot. That is so true. Wow. Grammy says they've gotten 17 inches of snow. It says several drifts are as tall as she is. Well, Grimner said, what? 10 inches worth of snow there? Is that true, Grimner? What? You said white stuff. Now, I'm assuming you mean snow, huh? But that's okay. Anyhow, what else is going on? I can tell you what today's date is. It's the 30th, the last day of April of 2017. So where is this world going? Where's the time going? Who knows? Only the shadow knows. Oh, but it's all melted now. That's no fun, Grim there. Dang. Find you one of those big old hills and ride your car hood down like we used to do as kids. We had sleds too, but I mean, who can resist the old monstrous car hood off a 56 Pontiac, I think it was. I mean, we're talking big. These are big cars. And we just get on it and ride down the hill and no way to steer it. So hopefully you were lucky and didn't hit a tree in the process. But nowadays, oh my, we'd have Oh, child enforcement officers coming out. Oh my, the children. Who will take care of the children? Oh, we have gotten so out of whack. That's not what we're going to talk about. Excuse me while I cough. Okay, back. Yeah, I don't like to cough in your ear. I try to avoid it if possible. Anyway, we got some stories we'll kick off on. Yeah, I've been dragging it out just a little bit to see if Brenda can walk back in the door here pretty soon. But still no love. Okay, a couple stories. One thing I do want to start out with. Kind of an important story, actually. 9 years ago, not too far from here. Oh, Grumner shot a picture in the chat room. I'd check all the snow out. That'd be good. But 9 years ago, not too far from here, actually, a couple of college students, Virginia Tech students, were murdered. They were murdered in a fairly remote area of the Jefferson National Forest. Now, what makes that unusual? Well, for that part of the world, you don't see much of that. It's not... back in the day, there were some rough people around, but you didn't actually see so many murders. But it's a cold case from 2009. They'd gone, I'll give the names here, Heidi Childs and David Metzler. And this happened on August 26, 2009. They found them in the parking lot of the Caldwell Fields camping area, the Jefferson National Forest outside of Blacksburg. It's a cold case, but, of course they'll try to continue to work it. And, that's understandable. Things become quite difficult after that period. But the Metzler's 92 Toyota was found sitting in a small parking lot of the activity area. Both of them had been shot and killed. The lead officer of the case says that they're still actively investigating, and it's a task force made up of the Sheriff's Department, State Police, FBI, and U.S. Marshals. Jefferson National Forest obviously being under the jurisdiction of the federal as well, I guess concurrent jurisdiction. Metzler, the young man, his body was found inside the car, but the young lady's was found in the parking lot, and the indication was that she may have tried to run with no success. Her purse, cell phone, credit card, digital camera, and Virginia Tech ID had been taken, which suggests a robbery motive. Doesn't prove it, but suggests it. Now, one of the important things here is there was DNA recovered, but they've been unable to match it to anyone. So I guess I'll throw this out here, because if anyone happens to hear this live or in archive that might have some idea of what this was, who was responsible for this, there's a reward in excess of $65,000 in place. So, and just so you will see what this place looks like, I'll pass along a link that shows the location and tells a little bit about the Caldwell Fields Group Campground. So, just anyway, something to keep in mind, store away. It's probably one of the biggest benefits that we have from this whole new media paradigm, is we have the ability to share these kinds of events with people all over the world, anywhere and everywhere. And you never know. Someone out there might have seen something, and no one's ever approached them about it. Or they might not even known that something happened. They just might have been there. Excuse me. Might have been there, saw something, left before they even realized anything happened. So it's important to try to figure out who does this stuff. Anyway, let's move on. What about Chipotle? No, not really. What this story ought to be headlined is what about CNBC? Huh? Now let's put this story in focus here. Cough time. Hang on. So here's the story, the real story. That Chipotle's shares, or stock shares, rose Tuesday as the company reported better than expected earnings. Their expected earnings were actually $1.60 a share rather than the $1.27 expected by those experts. The revenue was $1.07 billion rather than the $105 billion expected by those experts. And the same store sales grew 17.8% versus expected growth of 14.9%. Okay, that's all really, really cool because actually, as you've probably heard us talk about in the past, Chipotle is one of our favorite places because they're just kicking dirt in the face of Monsanto and all these people because they don't serve GMO stuff. The stuff that they serve is really, really good, and I highly recommend it if you have an opportunity to go to one. But with all that great news, they headlined the story by saying Chipotle's data breach overshadows big earnings beat. Okay. Where in the story is that talked about? Scan down the page. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 paragraphs from the bottom. The story says these gains were overshadowed by the company telling investors that it had detected unauthorized activity on a network that supports payment processing for purchases made at Chipotle restaurants. And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 paragraphs above it is the story about their performance. Now, I don't know about you, but I find it highly unusual that we're going to take all that good news and those other paragraphs and we're going to try to overshadow it, as they say, by a data breach. Just think about that. Just think about that. I'm sure that people like Monsanto and these other GMO murderers, as I call them, are probably not very happy with Chipotle. But apparently the consumer is. But let's not talk about that. Let's talk about the fact that somebody broke into their payment processing center, even though Chipotle says that they've repaired the problem. And even though your credit card protects you against anything like that, So what's the big deal? The big deal is they want to distract you away from the more important part of the story. And thank you, Sarah Whitten of CNBC. We'll throw that in the chat room if I can get it to work. There we go. Okay. All right, now, you guys. Years not too awfully long ago, the health food people were trying to convince you that tofu is the way to go. You have to eat tofu. Well, turns out you're much better eating organic eggs, grass-fed meat, and raw dairy products. The worst of the worst comes when soy products are brought into the equation. All processed soy contains phytates that block mineral absorption and trypsin inhibitors that block proper digestion. Tofu is only one step up because it's a whole soy product, but still contains the anti-nutrients mentioned above. So what are the problems that can occur from eating a high soy diet? Well, how about thyroid problems, including weight gain, lethargy, malaise, fatigue, hair loss, and loss of libido? Now, think about that one a minute. Population control. Anyway, premature puberty and other developmental problems in babies, children, and adolescents. But then you can get cancer or brain damage or reproductive disorders, population control. And of course, people are allergic to soy, which is probably related more to vaccines than to soy, but that's another story. Okay, some people have sent a 65-page petition to the Food and Drug Administration asking them to retract the soy prevent heart disease claim. Isn't it interesting? As time goes on, we just find all these things. There's more to it even. Soybeans are high in natural toxins, known as anti-nutrients. Contains hemagglutinin, which cause red blood cells to clump together. Soybeans have the growth-depressant substances, and while these substances are reduced in processing, they're not completely eliminated. Here's the big deal. Well, I don't know if it gets much bigger, but most soybeans are, at least 80%, are genetically modified. And they contain one of the highest levels of pesticide contamination of all foods. Population control. And the article goes on to say there are, unbelievably, some safe ways to enjoy soy. But why would you even want to go through all that brain damage? I don't understand. Scientists say, now this was actually kind of a fun one. Scientists say that the number one food to combat hypertension, heart attack, stroke, and cholesterol is a date. I'm not talking about a blind date. I'm talking about the fruit date. In fact, the Healthy Food House says that dates are one of the healthiest foods you can consume. They're rich in beneficial ingredients that treat various health issues, including hypertension, heart attack, strokes, and high cholesterol. They also accelerate metabolism. Okay. 8 health benefits. Dates prevent diarrhea. They're high in potassium, which prevents diarrhea by the healthy bacteria, and thus relieving the belly flora and the intestines. Dates regulate cholesterol. Dates clean blood vessels and prevent the formation of blood clots, so they effectively regulate the unhealthy cholesterols, or LDL. Dates regulate blood pressure. They're high in potassium and contain 0 sodium, so they're perfect in the case of hypertension. 5 to 6 dates contain 80 milligrams of magnesium, which boosts the blood flow and is spread through the blood vessels. To reduce blood pressure, you need about 360 milligrams of magnesium. So you can do the math on that one. For anemia, they're a rich source of iron, so they're extremely useful in the case of anemia, pregnancy, and for children. 100 grams of dates will provide 0.9 milligrams of iron, which is about 11% of the recommended daily intake. Dates prevent strokes. The high potassium content of these fruit enhances the nervous system and prevents strokes. Hence, the daily intake of 400 milligrams of potassium successfully prevents strokes. Dates for heart health. Soak the dates in water during the night, and in the morning eat them or add them to your smoothie to support heart health. They also soothe constipation, an aspect that's a little bit like a prune. Dates are extremely useful in the case of constipation. You should keep them in some water overnight, then drink the water in the morning. They have a mild laxative property. And last but not least, dates help weight loss. The consumption of dates on an empty stomach will help you control your body weight, as they contain 0 cholesterol, as we mentioned earlier. Okay, so you guys maybe may find that helpful. I do, because I have a little thing going on with the LDL and the blood pressure, but we're working on it. How many of you ever heard the term epigenetic? It's actually kind of a new term to me. I heard it just maybe a year ago. And essentially what epigenetic refers to are genetic effects from your environment, for lack of a better description. Scientists have observed epigenetic being passed down for 14 generations. And that could have an impact on a whole lot of things. We've talked about psychopathic behaviors and things like that appear to be genetically shared, but there could be more than that. The most important set of genetic instructions we all get comes from our DNA, passed down through generations. But the environment we live in can make genetic changes as well. Researchers have now discovered that these kinds of environmental genetic changes can be passed down for a whopping 14 generations in an animal. To study how long the environment can leave a mark on genetic expression, a team led by scientists from the European Molecular Biology Organization in Spain took genetically engineered nematode worms that carry a transgene for fluorescent protein. But anyway, we'll not dig too much deeper into that. But what I thought was important was the impact that environment can actually have. You know, we hear about the nature versus nurture. Well, maybe it's not a versus at all. Maybe they work hand in hand. And certainly it appears that the environment can affect the nature of things. It's not a very long article. I'll share it with you here for those who might find that of interest. I apologize. I'm having one heck of a time with this coughing business, but we'll keep moving. Oh, the Cherokee Nation has filed a lawsuit against Big Pharma over an opioid epidemic. This is from April 21st, 2017 on Anti-Media. On Thursdays, lawyers representing the Cherokee Nation filed a lawsuit against major pharmaceutical companies claiming they have pumped dangerous painkillers into Native American communities in Oklahoma. The Washington Post obtained a copy of the court filings and reported that the companies are accused of breaking laws by failing to prevent the diversion of pain pills to the black market. How interesting. We have evolved from smallpox-tainted blankets to opioids. The suit claims that corporations turned a blind eye to the problem of opioid diversion and profited from the sale of prescription opioids to the citizens of the Cherokee Nation in quantities that far exceeded the number of prescriptions that could reasonably have been used for legitimate medical purposes. The claim that the opioid crisis has caused the Cherokee Nation to incur increased spending on law enforcement, medical facilities, drug treatment centers, and foster and adoption programs. Lawyers hope that by filing the suits in tribal court, they will be able to gain quicker access to records that could show distinct negligence on the part of major drug companies. The suit names McKesson, Cardinal Health, and AmerisourceBergen, which together control 85% of prescription drug distribution in the United States. Walgreens and CVS are also named in the suit. So anyway, something to be aware of. Somebody stepped up and took a shot at Big Pharma. Big Pharma, our friends. Okay, let's see here. How to protect yourself from glyphosate. Why would you want to do that? Well, that guy on TV, remember him? He said he'd drink a whole glass of it. It wasn't going to bother him, but when he was challenged to do so, he said, I think I changed my mind. But who are these maggots? Where do they find these people? I mean, yeah, I kind of get it, how people might be convinced that, we have a population problem. I kind of get that, how that could happen. But how you go from there to willingly and knowingly kill people, murder people. How do you get there from here? I think they're exactly right. A psychopath's mindset is not one that a normal person will understand. Certainly I will at least make a claim to be a normal person, and I can't understand that mindset. I can comprehend the math that goes into it, but as far as the rest of it, I don't get it. But, as things go, people come up with ways to protect yourself, and glyphosate is certainly one of the things you want to protect yourself from. Okay, 24 different ways. Pay attention. Also, I'll drop this in the chat room. And if you weren't here to get it, sorry. Eat more sulfur-rich foods, which would include eggs, organic cheese, onions, and garlic. Glyphosate exposure in the body depletes sulfur and also affects sulfate pathways. So you want to make sure that you add more sulfur into your diet to compensate there. Dr. Stephanie Seneff, a senior scientist at MIT, has done a lot of research on glyphosate and health. She has this to say about sulfur. One of the most important things to protect yourself from the harmful effects of glyphosate is to be sure to get enough dietary sulfur. So please do so. Eat organic. Well, that's a no-brainer. If you're looking to reduce glyphosate, then you eat stuff that isn't produced with glyphosate. In fact, research has shown that eating an organic diet for 1 week reduces pesticide exposure in the diet by 90%. Let's deconstruct that. Let's deconstruct that a second. Okay. So what they're saying is, in 1 week, you are exposing yourself to a factor of 90% as far as glyphosate is concerned. Think about that. But it's not hard to believe when you consider the fact that it's used as a desiccant. They use it to spray cut fields, ostensibly to help the fields dry up quicker and make the process faster. That's the story. Of course, the story also is, I learned recently from a Facebook exchange, that they also have a patent as for glyphosate being an antibiotic. I didn't accept it at face value, but it turns out that person was correct. They do hold the patent that says glyphosate is an antibiotic. Wow. So what unbelievable bullshit. If it weren't so serious, it'd almost be funny. The level that they go to kill you. Avoid all GMO foods. Well, that kind of makes sense, right? But that also can include things like cooking oils, margarine, biscuits, baked goods, snack bars, cereals, and sodas. Avoid all that stuff. Consume plenty of dietary probiotics. Glyphosate is a patented antibiotic, as I mentioned. It kills bacteria living in our gut. One way to protect yourself is to increase your consumption of dietary probiotics. Test your body's exposure level. If you want to try to find out how much glyphosate's in your body, this is how you do it. It's possible to measure glyphosate levels in the urine. I recommended My Labs for Life, and there's a link in the article, which I'll put in the chat room. Also, Great Plains Laboratory. It doesn't necessarily map directly to your total glyphosate burden because there's a large percentage of the glyphosate you're exposed to daily that washes out to the kidneys over probably a 2-week period. But there's another small percentage that insidiously accumulates in your bone marrow and elsewhere in your tissues, and this part is not easy to measure. It's that part that accumulates, that it continues to cause disease long after you were first exposed to it. What an elegant invention it was, huh? Put yourselves in the mind of the mad scientist. From a product they originally claimed was non-persistent. But everybody forgot about that. Supplement your diet with manganese. Glyphosate's a powerful chelator of certain minerals. It's even patented as a chelating agent. What? The only thing it's not patented as is a capital punishment drug. When probably most appropriately, that's where it should be patented. One mineral that it binds very well to is manganese. Studies have shown that Roundup depleted manganese level in animals and plants. A manganese deficiency is linked to a wide range of health effects, including mitochondrial function, population control, gut health, and cognitive decline. Supplement with quality manganese supplements such as Thorne Research manganese, bisglycinate, and I'll drop, like I said, this will be in the chat room so you can look it up. Alternately, consume plenty of manganese-rich foods such as tea, cloves, mussels, and molasses. Ensure these are all organically sourced. Avoid the worst offenders. All GMO crops are going to be high on the list. But even some non-GMO crops are sprayed with Roundup days prior to harvest. This is known as desiccation. Now, isn't that interesting? You can be convinced that raising crops using glyphosate, GMO crops, is a problem. About apparently as easily as you can be convinced that you can use Roundup as a desiccant safely. What? Wow. Farmers do this to help increase crop yield. As the plant dies from glyphosate exposure, it sends all its energy to the seed in one last survival push. Now that is, talking about putting lipstick on a pig. Holy crap. Okay. The biggest offenders include soy, canola, corn, and cotton. Vegetable oils such as canola oil. Certain breads, corns, beer, sugar, chickpeas, and lentils. Avoid those foods at all costs. A caveat being that organic varieties of those foods obviously are okay. Here's a book recommendation. Poison Foods of North America. Guide to Navigating the Glyphosate Minefield on Our Food Web. So there's a book you can look at. Use only organic or grass-fed bones for bone broth. Okay. Avoid non-organic collagen products. A structural protein found in skin and other connective tissue. So if you're a regular consumer of collagen-containing products, make sure the collagen is organically sourced. And we're talking about things like Jell-O and candies and ice cream, some cheeses and dips. And obviously, don't use Roundup at home. Interesting point. I just recently tried, I think we talked about this, vinegar as a weed killer, specifically a poison ivy killer. And it works like a champ. This regular distilled white vinegar in a sprayer. Now, it looks like it may take a couple of applications to get the more established of the plants, but it just knocks it out, and highly recommended. So if you want a really inexpensive weed killer, now it is non-selective. Whatever you spray will go, but as far as things like poison ivy, if you're allergic to it badly, it's well worth it. So highly recommend that from my personal experimentation. If your neighbors are spraying Roundup, stay indoors. Glyphosate's most harmful when inhaled. Studies show that inhaling glyphosate, even in trace amounts, cause DNA damage. Population control. Avoid recently sprayed parks and play areas. Okay. Detoxify if exposed to glyphosate. things like activated charcoal, bentonite clay, sauerkraut juice, and organic soil matter can all help. Experiments on cows showed both reduced urinary levels of glyphosate and improved health following a treatment regimen that consisted of orally delivered fulvic acid and humic acid, along with sauerkraut juice, activated charcoal, and bentonite clay. The writer here believes that the nutrients from the soil bind to glyphosate and take it out through the feces. Supplement with, now here's a word, glutathione. I know I didn't get that right, but you'll see it in the link, which is one of the body's most important antioxidant and detoxification factors. Don't use vegetable oils for cooking. Vegetable or seed oils such as canola oil, peanut oil, corn oil, soybean oil, and sunflower oil are all extremely high in polyunsaturated acids. These fat acids are easily oxidized and can cause a lot of health problems. Worse, a lot of these oils are made from GMO crops, corn, rapeseed, and soy. These crops contain high levels of glyphosate residue. So get the picture here. We're not talking about like the guy sitting with a glass full of glyphosate. We're talking about trace amounts. As Hal Anthony likes to say on his show, Behind the Woodshed, that airs here from 3 to 5 every Sunday, what evil genius can come up with such things? Use plant extracts to protect from glyphosate exposure. Okay. Eat a cholesterol-rich diet. Interesting. If you're worried about saturated fat or cholesterol, be sure to read my article, blah, blah, blah. Now you know that saturated fat isn't going to clog up your arteries. Now, that's a whole nother topic, and I'll just leave that for you guys. There's actually a little video there that you can watch. Get outside. Get out in the sunshine. Glyphosate can disrupt the enzyme that's responsible for making cholesterol sulfate. This is not a good situation. Cholesterol sulfate can help shuttle cholesterol around the body without needing it to be packaged up in LDL particles associated with heart disease. If you watch that video I just mentioned, the skin is the main producer of cholesterol sulfate. When exposed to the sun, it produces cholesterol sulfate along with vitamin D. So you should be out in the sun more. It's not a bad idea under any conditions. Get more sleep. That sounds like a good idea. Vitamin C, take a good vitamin C supplement. I recommend that in any case. Drink spring water. And that means, as it says here, that the glyphosate is not only found in our food, but also in our waterways and rainwater supply. That non-persistent glyphosate, man, sure hangs around, doesn't it? Otherwise, install a reverse osmosis filter in your house to remove all pollutants and chemicals, not just glyphosate. Actually, I prefer reverse osmosis water. And so forth and so on. Sorry that was a long article, but I think that's a very important article. I think there are a few people out there who could not benefit from that. Remember, Hal and I used to talk about, as your internet traffic flows around the web, where all does it go? You do a trace route and all that stuff, and find out where the traffic bounces around through. Well, Motherboard actually put a map together to show if your web traffic passes through an NSA listening post. It's called IX Maps, and they intend to make visible the secret, dangerous, and often illegal forms of surveillance that are increasingly becoming part of everyday life. And it goes on to talk about how the internet works in general, and how IX Maps examines the tracer routes, the geographic path that data takes when bouncing through the internet exchanges. So something that some of you may find interesting. I'll go ahead and drop that in the chat room. Have fun with that one. Okay. A lot of people, and there's a lot of educational snobbery and all that. that how could anyone possibly know anything unless they have a degree, unless they've been sufficiently educated, unless they have their PhD, how can you possibly know anything? Well, guess what? Here is a long list of famous scientists from history who never had a science degree. Now, wrap your head around that. There's scientists without a science degree. Oh my God, this word cannot get out. The institutions of higher learning who live off taking as much money from you and the government as you possibly can to create nice little compliant workers for those people. The old saying used to be that the A and B students always end up working for the C and D students. I think that's quite true in most cases. But Leonardo da Vinci was one of those scientists. Mathematician, engineer, anatomist, geologist, botanist, inventor, artist. He didn't have a science degree. Antoine van Leeuwenhoek, the first microbiologist, known as the father of microbiology, didn't have a science degree. Benjamin Franklin, physicist, inventor, labeled as America's first scientist. No science degree. William Herschel, astronomer, discoverer of the planet Uranus. No science degree. Caroline Herschel, the sister of William, astronomer, named by the Royal Society one of the 10 women in British history who have had the most influence on science. No science degree. Mary Somerville, mathematician, astronomer, science writer, named by the Royal Society one of the 10 women in British history with the most influence on science, also called the Queen of 19th century science. No science degree. Michael Faraday, physicist, chemist, electromagnetism pioneer. He coined the term electrode, cathode, and ion. No science degree. Mary Anning, paleontologist, fossilist, named also one of the 10 women in British history with the most influence on science. The nursery rhyme and tongue twister, She Sells Seashells by the Seashore, was based on her. No science degree. William Goodyear, chemist, discovered the process of vulcanizing rubber. No science degree. William Darwin Fox, naturalist, entomologist, insect researcher. No science degree. Charles Darwin, naturalist, evolutionary theorist, geologist. No science degree. William Fox, paleontologist. No science degree. Henry David Thoreau, naturalist, also a famous author. No science degree. Thomas Henry Huxley, or T.H. Huxley, biologist, anatomist, coined the term agnostic. No science degree. James Prescott Joule, physicist, co-discoverer of the law of conservation of energy. No science degree. Gregor Mendel, botanist, naturalist, first geneticist, the father of modern genetics. No science degree. Thomas Edison, and his list is long, and I just won't even go over it because I'm sure you all know Thomas Edison. No science degree. Ivan Vladimirovich Miturin, I.V. Miturin, horticulturist, botanical geneticist with no science degree. Reginald Hooley, paleontologist and fossilist, no science degree. Henrietta Swan Leavitt, astronomer with no science degree. Vladimir Nabokov, entomologist, butterfly evolutionary theorist, curator of butterfly studies, I can't pronounce that word, at the Museum of Comparative Zoology at Harvard University. No science degree. And today, Robert Evans, these are living people, Australian-born astronomer with no science degree. Richard Leakey, everybody heard of Richard Leakey, right? The Kenyan-born paleoanthropologist, human evolutionary theorist, no science degree. Stephen Felton, American-born paleontologist and fossilist. None have a science degree. So what's the point of all that? Yeah, actually, Tesla did. His degree came from his home country. I can't remember which one it was, but he was a fairly highly educated fellow. But yeah. Anyhow, the point with all that is don't let anyone ever tell you that your thoughts aren't, and your theories and your research, those things aren't as valuable as some bonehead who happened to go into debt for $400 bazillion to go to college and be given a piece of paper. Don't ever let anybody do that. Because this whole list, the accomplishments, I'm sure you probably recognize many, but they're just indispensable. And none of these guys had these fancy pieces of paper that said they were scientists. Don't let people do that to you. You never know what you might discover. Let me drop that in the chat room. So you can have some fun with it. And now all you guys can go out and discover all kinds of things. And kind of a fun story here as we're starting to draw up toward the end. This is actually from a public PR Newswire release. They discovered a time capsule, they believe, associated with Jules Verne. Wow. And they found it in the French Pyrenees. It was a multidisciplinary team of archaeologists and historians from the Paris Descartes University made an extraordinary discovery. Work began in September using drones and ground-penetrating radar in order to find a metal container dating from the end of the 19th century. The investigation started thanks to the meticulous study of the works of Jules Verne, and in particular analysis of the famous author's tomb. With all the material collected and using complex geolocation algorithms, the team was able to identify the area in which they might find some kind of object associated with Verne. The contents of this potential time capsule are currently being analyzed in an environment which will ensure the preservation and non-contamination of the items. The items themselves have deteriorated with the passage of time and damp from being underground so long. The archaeologists have also found engravings on the outside of the box which have become barely legible. Preliminary X-rays have revealed some clues. They've shown documents, books, and metal objects of different sizes and shapes. The conclusions of these studies, therefore, indicate the existence of new works or new evidence from that time period. For the moment, it has not been possible to prove conclusively that the box and its contents belong to Jules Verne or someone close to him. However, everything points to the possibility that they may discover unpublished documents belonging to the writer. How much fun is that? That's really, to me anyway, that's kind of some neat stuff there. Anytime you find something, I mean, I've always been fascinated with things like hidden treasure and time capsules and things like that. Wow, neat stuff. Okay, here we go. Everybody ready to get mad in the last 4 minutes of the show? Maybe we should we do that? And no, Brenda hasn't shown up. I don't know what the problem is. It's about a 3-hour drive, so nope, she hasn't gotten home. Anyway, we'll kind of end up here and make everyone mad. But it's actually something that relates well to stuff that Hal talks about in his show. A court rules that living off the grid is illegal. And that was a court in Cape Coral, Florida. Special Magistrate Harold S. Eskin ruled that Robin Speronis is not allowed to live on her own private property without being hooked up to the city's water system. The magistrate admitted that she has the right to live without utility power, but said that her alternative power sources must always first be approved by the city. Speronis has been taking a stand for years, not against the city of Cape Coral. Back in November of 2013, a code enforcement officer attempted to evict her for living without utilities. The city's argument is that, now here's where the fun part starts. Get ready. Fasten your seatbelts. The city's argument is that the International Property Maintenance Code, I'll say that again, the International Property Maintenance Code was violated by her reliance on rainwater rather than paying the city for water. Also known as the IPMC, also makes it a crime for her to use solar panels instead of being tied to the electric grid. International Property Maintenance Code in Cape Coral, Florida. At this point, the argument is just that Speronis must hook up to the grid even if she doesn't use it. She's actually won 2 of 3 outings on this matter, but there's still a big fight. But let's move on to something here. I'm sitting here looking at this saying, what? An international property maintenance code that's being enforced by localities? Well, yeah, here it is. I found the thing. And here's the preamble to it. In order to promote public education and public safety, equal justice for all, a better informed citizenry, the rule of law, world trade, and world peace, this legal document is hereby made available on a non-commercial basis. That is, as it is the right of all humans to know and speak the laws that govern them. This is the International Property Maintenance Code, a member of the International Code family. Sounds like a horror movie. That includes code, standards, and guidelines, membership benefits, education and certification, and communication on industry news. You get all those things for joining up. And I'll just drop that in the chat room for everyone to see. This is Agenda 2030, even though this was published in 2012. And I'll drop both those in here, and it's time for me to get. I'm sorry that Brenda wasn't here tonight. She just hasn't gotten back. They probably stopped somewhere to get something to eat, I'm guessing. Anyway, thanks so much for joining us tonight on The Road Less Traveled. I apologize for being a sick dog, but I tried to minimize that effect as much as I could. Anyway, we'll catch up with you here next week. Next week, though, I do want to say something about that. Next week's actually going to be at least scheduled, to be a major interview with a very special guest. Now, one of the conditions of this interview is that there will be no archive. There will be no recording. There will be no archive. And the people, specific people, are greatly encouraged to be here. And I think most of those people are here anyway. But be here for that one. It's going to be very, very important. But anyway, thanks so much for joining us this week on The Road Less Traveled. Again, sorry that Gigi's Boo couldn't make it. But, I think the gunsmithing thing is really cool. And I think her uncle's done a great job. Anyway, take care, and we'll catch you next week on The Road Less Traveled. Bye-bye.